I'm Casey Husseman, Executive Director with People's Memorial Association.
And I'm Beverly. I'm the Communications Director for People's Memorial Association.
And I'm Katrina Spade, founder and CEO of Recompose, the first company in the world to bring human composting to life.
Yeah.
Woo!
Wonderful. Great to see you again, Katrina.
Thank
We
you.
obviously have met you a few times over the years, Beverly more than me. But part of why I wanted to get some time with you today is I feel like natural organic reduction, composting, it's all over the news right now. It's definitely being locally advertised here in Washington State. I've seen a couple funeral homes putting it on billboards and on the radios and such, as well as there's been some coverage in the Seattle Times. And generally it seems like the adoption, which was legalized in 2019, is underway. Tell me how you've been seeing that adoption and what that's looked like from the provider end in the last few years.
You know, the word that keeps coming up for me these days is mainstream. Like, are we gonna bring human composting mainstream? Because really, like, early days, 2016, 17, when I was floating the idea by people who knew funeral law, it was like, yeah, well, good luck. Maybe one state would pass. Maybe you could have a chance of it happening. And there's just really no arguing the fact that it's like got a lot of momentum happening, right? 12 states as of
12 states.
March 2025, right?
What was the latest date?
Oh God, the last state was it? I'm gonna offend someone in Minnesota if I say Minnesota, but I think it might have been.
Yeah. Oh, that's so exciting.
And there's a lot of movement happening in other states.
Of
Utah, Georgia has a bill that's got wicked legs on it. So
Wow.
yeah, so it's like kind of fun to think. I mean, gosh, this could be not just a weird Seattle idea, but something that's gone to the wider world.
They've got it in Arizona, so I think it's gone mainstream.
There you go.
Yeah. It's not just California. That's so exciting. Congratulations.
Yes. So tell us how you see the business of Recompose doing today. What's going well? What have you learned?
Yeah, I sometimes think about the like three kind of marketing eras that we had. That's sort of one way to look at what's evolved over time. You know, the early days, like I mentioned, these are like where we were talking about an idea. It was like it wasn't legal, it hadn't happened yet. We knew, and not we, just we. I think it was fair to say, lots of people were disappointed with the state of the funeral industry and the options for our bodies after death. For the most part, it's like we had cremation and conventional burial, and it was hard to find at that time, maybe still today, someone who was super excited about either of those options.
I've met
Right.
remarkably few doing community education.
Right, like cremation, I'm so excited about cremation in the US. And so then it was about sharing this idea. What if we composted bodies? What if we transformed bodies into soil? What would that look like? What does it need to happen? But also, how would it feel to people? And so that was like the first era, was just sharing the idea. And then once like a legislation happened in 2019 and went into effect in 2020, the kind of communication and message shifted into, once we opened our doors to the first place, which was down in Kent, the message shifted to, this exists, it's an option, and here's how it works. Really, you know, I said over and over the statements about there's a vessel, we place wood chips, alfalfa, and straw in that vessel. Over the span of a couple of months' time, your body transforms. So it was really about educating on the basics of the process, which of course today still has to happen. Because there's some people who haven't heard of it.
Well, that was maybe my favorite era of their marketing, because up until that point, until they had their own place, they didn't have a phone number. And so people that wanted to talk to Katrina or had questions about NOR or about the legislation would call PMA and say, like, I'm trying to get a hold of Katrina, how can I do that? And it's like, I can't tell you.
I can tell you about doing composting.
Yeah, so once she had a phone number, that was my favorite part.
Yeah, that's a good era. Yeah, we got a phone number.
Love that.
And
Beverly,
then,
there's someone else that was there during
Yeah.
that transition. Tell me about like how in lockstep PMA was with Recompose. Like who was doing what bit of educating?
I got the impression, because I started in 2018, I got the impression that like our leadership at the time and our membership was on board immediately. It didn't seem like we had to sell it that hard to people as like an option. Not that we were trying to prioritize it over other death care options, but just that we wanted people to feel like they had as many options as possible, and maybe even things they could get excited about. Because like I said, I've been with PMA since 2018, and I don't think I've ever met a single person going, yeah, cremation! It would be extraordinary. But I think that it just like, it was a natural sort of pairing for our members that really value autonomy and options, and we are such tree huggers at PMA, and we always have been. So I think it was just like such a ripe community for partnership.
for sure.
Is that-
And also the organization's totally obvious partnership, because it's like, y'all are about options, we're bringing one new option to the world, and like,
Exactly.
even if it's just that, it's like a really clear reason for partnering up, and for like feeling like we're both, you know, trying to move, part of the same movement to grow death care. Yeah.
I think some of our like longer term or maybe multi-generational member families kind of also saw the parallels between the work that you were doing and the sort of mainstreaming process of cremation that PMA really sort of spearheaded in Seattle since the founding. And so members were like, you know, even if that's not the option for me, I remember how impactful it was to protect this option for consumers. So it was a natural thing where even people that are like, I'm not really into it, but I want everybody to get that same sense of identifying options that feel like a good fit for them and not feeling like they're compromising, especially in such a big decision.
Sure. Yeah.
You
Now we're in era 3. So I would say, to give you a quick update on where Recompose is today, we've composted over 500 people. We've cared for their family and friends throughout the process, which involves a lot of hopefully really great communication. It's a much longer process than something like cremation to work with the family through natural organic reduction, right? It's a few months of relationship together. And then the message is now about like what makes Recompose. And so you're sitting here in our facility in Seattle. This is a big part of what makes us, or how we sort of showcase what makes Recompose. And I think the way I like to boil it down best is that hopefully you can see the intentionality that we've put into this place, and that intention and care goes through all the way through our process, from the people we hire to the actual process of composting, the chain of custody, attention to that, right? And so to just say, now what we're doing is showing that care and intention, and that we are really leaders in the space.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because for so long you were the whole movement, and now we have these other stakeholders and other businesses and even other countries and cultures that are wanting to incorporate this practice into their own death care option. And I don't know, do you ever feel kind of weird, like it's your baby and now like other people are taking it and running?
Well,
like,
I have college-aged kids.
what?
Same idea,
What?
right? Like,
When did they get college? Hold on a second.
I know.
I don't agree with
No,
this.
it's so wild.
Oh my
They,
God.
kids grow up and then they're their own person, and you're like, oh, I see. And so, sure, it was human composting, no question. That was my baby.
Yeah.
It's no longer
Yeah.
any one person's baby.
Wow.
It's being raised by community. So, but no, it's so. I mean, it is so cool to see it spreading, and the international piece is especially like, whoa, interesting.
Yeah.
When we, I'll get a email from someone who's in literally pick a country that wants to know how to legalize, how to bring it there. There's so much to get done. It's going to be long for lots of places before that happens. But when I say it might be going mainstream, like that's kind of the level I'm talking about.
We just had a conversation with someone from Japan who worked in death care, and we're talking about how enthusiastic they are about bringing composting there, and it really resonates with a lot of the Buddhist folks there, or the people that really have nature-based spiritualism. But one of the things he's like, what are we supposed to do with the soil? Many of us are living in extremely densely populated urban areas. Like, And so I was like, well, here's, how some businesses handle that in Washington. And so it's just like, it was so fascinating to be like, see them trying to adapt it to the sort of needs of their own community. And it was so bizarre. I'm like, I can't believe that like everybody knows about this now. It used to be the
power of the internet.
Yeah, it just used to be like a weird thing that we could talk about at parties.
Our parties.
Yeah, our parties with each other. But yeah, no, just that's incredible.
I actually would love to hear more about how you think the usage and where the soil has gone has changed over the last 5 years. Tell us what that's looked like.
Well, I still remember this was like 2017, I think, pre-law passing. And I was talking to a community of elders at a senior living facility. And I was like, okay, so here's what we're trying to do. We're going to make human composting legal. Then we'll be creating about a cubic yard of soil per person. And Linda Wolf raised her hand in the background and she was like, Katrina, my family does not want that cubic yard. And I was like, oh, right. Thank you for saying that out loud, Linda. And so from that realization, like you're creating quite a lot of soil per person. We just knew immediately we needed partnerships with, some place to put the soil, right? And the way Recompose decided to make that happen was to partner with nonprofit conservation and restoration organizations. So we now have 4 land partners around the state where we send soil that families don't have use for to whichever needs it most at the time.
Can you say which locations those are?
I can tell you we have a location in southern Washington, on Vashon, Skagit Valley, and Olympia.
Excellent.
So, not the whole state, but like pretty good western side of the state.
Yeah.
And we've made a lot of changes to that program over time because, for example, early days, you could choose where you wanted your soil to go. And what we realized is we were inadvertently setting up a cemetery experience for families. A very natural cemetery experience, but somewhat like a cemetery experience with nonprofit organizations with whom we don't own the nonprofits, we don't own the land, and we were like, oh, we're setting up this expectation that if you donate your soil there, then you can go visit it forever. That's a cemetery, really. Like that expectation is a cemetery, and Recompose is very much about like we're giving back to the natural ecosystem. It's okay to recreate the cemetery. That's not what Recompose is doing. And so we've made some changes to the land program, which have been really well received by our pre-compose membership, which is like, the soil goes where it's needed most. And those land partners will decide when they need, like, oh yeah, we definitely want a delivery. And so the thing is too, you donate soil to a particular place, it's moving. The minute you place it, it's going. Like a bird is picking it up or a squirrel is moving it, like the wind, rain, everything is moving that through the ecosystem. And to me, that's really beautiful.
I got to do some trail maintenance down near where your first site was, and I picked the party for the trail maintenance so I could go down there and just be like, like while we were working, I was like, I just like brought it up with the trail leader and everything, and they're like, oh yeah, it's supposed to be like a state secret where the scattering happens because like they don't want people, to be kind of like almost like maybe tourism, like treading through the area and stuff. And the guy was like, but all of us locals know where it is. It's right over there.
Oh yeah.
So it was we were doing maintenance on a different part of that general area, but I was just like, okay.
We do, like by law, every family gets to know where that soil was spread. So it's not I
think that he meant more like the public, would come like to be like, oh, let's go like the compost people.
It's not as exciting looking as you might think.
I know, right?
In the end, it looks just like soil. But
and this is one of the main changes we're seeing is cemetery tourism has always been a thing. People do want to see those spaces and treat them respectfully by and large. And now we have green burial locations. Now we have the composting, like to rest locate. It's changing what that cemetery experience is for people, but people still want it.
Yeah.
Well, it's so interesting because we were talking to some folks from New York, and in New York, their compost law requires the soil to end up in the cemetery, which seems like kind of point.
Okay. Yeah, it's too bad.
It's the question of what gets designated the cemetery now.
Yeah. It just seems like a waste of perfectly nutritive soil.
Yeah. Yeah. big fan of Washington State's regulations by and large, so
I think
it's always great when a state decides to follow those, but it's complicated.
I know.
Complicated.
That's fair.
Well, you are 5 years into making the dream of composting now a reality. This is a functioning business, but I'd love to hear what has surprised you about running this business 5 years later that maybe you didn't expect.
I mean, we covered the fact that it's going mainstream much faster than we thought. I would say another thing that surprised me, it's a little bit related, is just the, by and large, most of our clients care about the environment in some way, whether it's they're environmental activists or they're just avid gardeners, but not everybody, right? And that's one of the things that surprised me is just, for some, the idea that it's not your old school status quo funeral industry is enough of a reason to go with human composting and recompose. And they might not care about climate change at all. And that's been really cool to see, just like kind of the breadth of the interest. I'd say the other thing that surprised me has been the ability of different faith traditions to be woven in with the idea of being transformed into soil. It makes so much sense, right? And yet, I never, when sort of early days of design, I was always, clear that I was a non-religious person and sort of assumed it would be a thing for non-religious folks, but that's not been the case. So, yeah.
I think it's kind of interesting, like the largest part of my job was doing community education, and at least in the past couple of years, it's been predominantly towards environmentally friendly death care or the environmental concerns surrounding it.
Yes.
Last year was the first year that was the most commonly requested topic for classes. And the thing that I've kind of noticed, to your point about, it's not just like tree huggers and activists that are so amped up about this. The reasons that people are picking it, and I talk to people about this constantly, I'm starting to think that it's more of a manifestation of their death anxiety. That it helps them sort of make peace with the idea that their lives are finite if they imagine themselves symbolically living on. And so it seems like that's kind of when people tell me I want to be a tree or expressly, I want to be composted, they're thinking about themselves as like continuing on in this cycle. And so I think that it's helping to assuage some of those like concerns they have about their own mortality and like impermanence, where they're like, oh no, I'll still be a part of the forest. Like I'm not going away. Yeah. Like it seems like that's an interesting way for people to process their anxiety.
Well, you're 5 years into making this dream a reality. I'd love to hear what's next, or what are you focusing on in the coming 3 to 5 years?
And now that you've transformed death care completely, what's next?
Yeah, casual.
I mean, the reality is like, how this is, but like you're never ever done. And I was thinking about it the other day, and I was like, does that mean I'm never satisfied? And is that okay? It might be. I hope it is. It's like we can do so much more. We can serve more people here in our Seattle facility. I definitely want to be opening up more facilities around the country. And we have developing kind of a licensing program where we'll be able to also help places open in other parts of the world. So, I mean,
Wonderful.
That is the dream. 3 to 5 years, 7 to 10 years,
Yeah.
somewhere in there, yeah.
The need will continue.
The need will continue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The work doesn't stop.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
No. Yeah, I definitely will echo what Beverly says, which is one of the primary reasons that people are interested in funeral options. What are the options available is for the green side of things. They're concerned about their environmental impact. And as we know, things like cremation or a more traditional funeral do have very large environmental impacts during your end of life celebrations. What would you say to the people that are looking into end-of-life planning for those environmental options?
Yeah, I mean, really looking at every option first. I'm preaching to the choir here, but that's the best place to start. And doing it ahead of time is a very good idea. And I just experienced my father-in-law died quite suddenly, and so I think I know about this stuff. You would think I would not be flummoxed by the experience, but just no matter what, it can really throw you, we found. And so anytime you can have those conversations ahead of time are so good. And in terms of the more green options, I guess I would say like we sort of did what we said we were going to do, which was, okay, we've got natural burial, this beautiful concept in my opinion, kind of perfect. You bury the body directly in the ground, nature takes it back. What could be better? But it takes land to do that. So Recompose from the jump was like, what is the urban equivalent of that?
Yes.
And I would say that's exactly what human composting has been so far. We really are, like, Recompose is right here in Seattle. We really are that urban solution for green funeral care, right? So if you're in a city and you're thinking that way, that might help you make a decision if you're like green burial versus that, human composting, how to decide. That's one way to do it. But I am kind of proud that we've really made good on that promise to sort of like take what's best, what's amazing about natural burial and all the learnings there and all the good feelings and the environmental benefit, and then do something that works for our cities.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And I'll also call out, I agree that this is such a ideal solution for the urban environments for all of us that maybe can't handle a cubic meter of soil. I don't have quite that yard for it, but there is still adoption happening for natural organic production outside of these urban centers, because we, as People's Memorial, do surveys of the various price lists and offerings at all the funeral homes. And we're seeing the adoption of natural organic production by nearly 50% of funeral homes in Washington state. Is taking off so that it's not just available for the urban folk, and the people in the rural communities are also having access to, again, up to a meter of soil.
Yeah, and it makes sense if you've got that, you like live on that farm, you would want, the farmers got it first also. Early days, like going out to Pullman and doing the studies and learning that like farmers have been composting their horses and cows for decades, and many of them were like, I would want that for myself. So you're absolutely right. It's not just an urban solution, but it's nice because we didn't really have anything in cities that wasn't, I gotta travel a whole distance. So
I think it's kind of funny because in my mind, death care makes sort of strange bedfellows, where at least like when we looked at the process of advocating for the legalization of alkaline hydrolysis and natural organic reduction, of course we had people that were incredibly enthusiastic about the environmental impact of American death care, but we also had people that were really attracted to that option because on the complete other end of the political spectrum, they really are attracted to the idea of the autonomy of it, being able to function outside of a conventional business model, controlling the costs and like the privacy attached to it. And so it's a strange issue in that it unites people from really divergent ideology. That's always so stunning to me.
If someone is looking to learn more about natural organic production, what that means, where do you point them to get started?
Well, first, we offer tours here in Seattle of Recompose, and I highly recommend for anyone who's like, oh, I'm kind of curious. We do in-person tours and virtual tours several times a month, and we've had some people say, like, I came to Seattle, I went to the Space Needle, and then I came to Recompose, and we're like, yes, that's exactly right.
I can't wait till you make it into the guidebooks where you find like the package, like ride the ducks, visit Katrina.
Exactly. That is what we want.
That's so exciting.
Yeah. So, highly recommend a tour, but then also, we have spent a tremendous amount of time building out a website that isn't just trying to sell you a service, it is information rich. So if you can't find what you need, I would be shocked if the average or even above average person couldn't find what they're looking for in terms of information on our website. So that's recompose.life.
When you do talk to people that are sort of more new to the concept, how do you ever notice any trends in how people are hearing about these things or kind of getting directed to you?
Let's see. But just about every mainstream media outlet has covered human composting over the years. As you know, you've been part of some of those as well. I don't have great data on like how people are finding out about us, and even the folks who come to us, who call us when the death occurs, who aren't Recompose members and aren't signed up with us. We hear so many times like, my aunt saw an article a few years ago. That's tough data to track, as you probably know. It's like, do you remember the publication? No.
Yeah. That's so interesting to think
Yeah.
of all the things that you've read in the last couple of years, just casually.
Of course, right.
To have an article you read in a random publication stick with you years later, like that's a pretty strong commentary on how that piece of journalism impacted somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
the profundity of this work. I think there's that time of hearing about it to time of accepting it. We know that's a years-long process, individually, even longer at the more societal level.
Yeah.
But here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to wonder what the internet has done. So if you look at like cremation's rise
Yeah.
over decades, but then like human composting seems to be happening quite quickly.
Yes.
I mean, a big part of that is, boy, information sure does fly around these days.
Yeah.
So that's so true. Well, and I think also, there's like, I'm sure probably a ton of think pieces about how, American culture is so much different than during the time where cremation was mainstreaming. It's more acceptable to, move outside of those conventional frameworks, and more Americans don't identify with institutionalized religion that used to really govern the form that death care took. And so I'm sure that those things, there's tons of think pieces on that kind of stuff, but gosh, it really has to be the information age. It's like, I've threatened to turn it into a drinking game for, when I go places and there's people I don't know there, how long it'll take before someone goes, oh, have you heard of composting? And I'm just like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I find that too. I'm very popular at parties for that reason, because people have these nagging questions. It's raised, they chew on it for a while, the questions come up, and then they need to explore those questions before they accept it, maybe.
But yeah, it's just like everybody has kind of heard about it and everybody wants to talk about it, which is so interesting because I don't remember there ever being a time in my life where people were like, so let's talk about burial. Let's really dig into cremation. Like that was never a topic at a party or, like in a bar or something, but like this is something that people are excited to talk about and curious about.
And I can't help but wonder if it's more to do with, thinking back of acceptance of cremation, there just weren't that many options available to Americans 100 years ago. Is it that there's more options now, or is it more that we're seeing things like the environmental impacts taking more of a front stage for people, and so people are considering things like their environmental impact in all facets of their life, and eventually you come to the question of end-of-life care. What do I want to have happen to my body? What does that impact?
I feel like there's like a complicating issue, and we don't have a good way to tease it out because of the timing of when you open your business. At PMA, we noticed a major transformation in the way the public was communicating about death once COVID started. But your business has never existed outside of the context of COVID,
That's right.
like except in the very early babiest of days. And so you didn't really get that sense. And I feel like there was a major cultural transformation that happened with how much Americans were willing to engage with their mortality in a more proactive way and in a more like personal and visceral way. And so it must be so interesting to have that be the baseline for your business, is that people want to talk to you.
Yeah, and we don't have a before and after COVID-wise because we started operating several months into COVID. But like one of the easier things of doing this work has been getting people, always before COVID too, to want to engage around it, and getting the press to want to write something about it, which no surprise there. And then sort of related, the bet I made was that if we're going to be talking about something so different and pitching this idea that's not only transforming someone into, encouraging decomposition, right? Transforming someone into soil in an extremely rigorous way, but still. And it's talking about death, that bringing design into that conversation, or like leading with good design, or you can say it's not good. My opinion is it's good. Leading with design, right? Intention there is really important because it sort of softens and just locates you in, okay, yeah, this is really wild, and it's about nature in the end. Like it is actually about growing new life. And so I think that for me was early learning, like, okay, this is going to help from the legislative floor to obviously to marketing for clients today.
It kind of almost felt like a cultural moment where, at least with the discussion about advocating for these options, that it was like the subtext was, it's okay to like this. Where so much of the other death care options where it's just like, we don't want to talk about this, we don't want to engage with it, we're unhappy with the cost. It might be very meaningful and important in our grief process, but we don't want to talk about this or engage with it any more than we have to. and it almost felt like, and I wonder how much COVID plays into this, the timing of being like, what I want actually does matter. We talked to so many families, especially in the early days of COVID, that were losing loved ones and seeing the things that they were going through and saying, I don't want that. And it was really like they're turning that introspection inward and examining what they do care about. In so many families, they do care about their sort of footprint on the planet, or they do care about all of these things. And I don't know, I guess I don't have a ton of data before COVID, but it just felt like a really transformative moment where it was like culturally acceptable to be excited about it. Like, that's not something we've seen with cremation and burial.
Well, Katrina, I've asked you a couple questions. Do you have any questions for us, or what's top of mind for you?
What are you seeing? Are you seeing any new wild ideas coming down the pike for death care?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's some folks down in Scottsdale that are freeze drying folks.
Like
Right.
a Promession style? Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's
Why?
really interesting. I mean,
Fair question.
yeah, I guess that there's, I know there's a couple of different businesses that are exploring in different ways, like using nitrogen or, I think that it's just another alternative. I think one of the arguments that I had seen in favor of prevention was that by, I think it was using nitrogen to sort of solidify the body, they were using vibration to break it apart, and I think perhaps it would address the issue of the volume of soil that people end up with, and the environmental footprint is relatively low depending on how you feel about the nitrogen sourcing.
I know nothing about nitrogen, so.
I thought
Well,
that's
I mean-
very promising in your
I mean,
Not
not
about freeze drying.
business.
Not freeze drying.
Nitrogen's
I
the
know.
whole thing.
I know nothing about freeze drying.
Okay. Well, I don't know much
Freeze
about it, but I saw some stuff about it that I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
I imagine it's going to be a long ways out because there's you know how hard it is to change people's minds about something as closely held as death care practices. But I think that one of the things that was really helpful for NOR is how beautiful and gentle it is, and that was definitely something in your favor of like leaning into the nature of it all. And I don't think that they're necessarily going to benefit from that same thing with this particular option, but it might appeal to scientists and things
Yeah,
to
for
do
sure.
something like that.
I would say it's definitely falling on that same axis that natural organic production and alkaline hydrolysis is, which it's still a greener alternative than flame cremation or the traditional burial.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to see that some people are still exploring that space because have we reached the most positive for the environment? I'm not sure, and certainly in the matter of cost and scalability, accessibility for people in urban areas is still a bit of an open question because we are still seeing the rollout of these greener options at a larger scale.
Yeah.
I think that's the only one I've seen so
That's the
far.
only one. That's pretty cool though.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
What else is happening? I'm still seeing a lot of people in our circles on the nonprofit side of the death care spectrum talking about the issue of indigent burials or indigent cremation programs. So what happens when a family can't afford a private funeral? They end up relying on the state. These are things that have been happening really since the beginning of times. Think about people that the coroners find and have trouble identifying and such. And so the economics of death care, I think, are more forefront than ever before. That's probably another cultural shift. People have been learning a lot more about supply chains since the COVID pandemic hit, and I think that's affecting our industry too. And certainly growing up in Seattle and spending so much time in these cities, like we're seeing people care about that side of thing in what seems to me is volumes that we've never seen before. So I'm personally very interested to see how things like natural organic production, alkaline hydrolysis compete with cremation and burial for these kinds of programs, which our counties and states are running and are affecting the lives of so many different people. So again, as pertaining to the conversation of what's normal for people to take responsibility and interest in their own private lives, we're also seeing that empathy happening for, well, what are other people doing? What are the more popular options? What are the more economic options? Because of course we're still in a system where we're seeing that cremation is just cheaper. And why is it cheaper? Because it's the legacy option, because it was the alternative to burial, and it's been around for 100 years. We haven't seen these newer options be around for 100 years, but I guarantee you we'll see some of these prices dropping.
Debate. I mean, the first patent for alkaline hydrolysis was filed in the late 1800s, I will say.
Mm-hmm.
And mortality composting has been around for a long time.
So true.
It's true. In the way, is it back to basics? This is always that weird American dichotomy.
Yeah.
We act like traditional has a major legacy, but really it's, 120 years
not
of
that
legacy?
Maybe it's just like that thing where no matter what you design, you always end up with a train again.
It does feel like that.
But I mean, I think that's a sign that it's effective, it works, you know, the simple is really where it's at.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up because it's something that we talk a lot about at PMA because so many people do rely on us for help with the affordability side of death care. And of course, we gather a lot of data about it. And I think it's really promising here in Washington to find that alkaline hydrolysis in particular isn't that much more expensive than cremation. And so I think that'll be helpful for the folks that are excited about environmental death care but are concerned about the price point.
Yes.
But NOR remains pretty expensive, and the average family, you know, I think from the conversations I've had with the community, feel like it's a little bit out of reach, and I think there are certainly some rippling ramifications for like which groups of people have access to that type of care. And I would be kind of curious, I know that you've been doing some work here to expand the financial assistance that's available to the community to make sure more people can access this care. Would you talk a little bit about the work surrounding that and kind of what your vision is? And I don't know, just
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I mean, the first thing I have to do is look at the people it takes to do the work of composting a human body and the time it takes. So you think about cremation, it's 2 to 4 hours long.
Yep.
That is an extremely different situation than composting someone and having a relationship with their friends and family for 2 to 3 months. It just is.
It's almost like subletting to the family
It's
for
like,
a little
exactly.
bit. Like
I mean, you're coming
mentor.
to visit our hotel for the dead. You're spending a month in our vessel, right?
Yeah.
So it just unfortunately it is a different category of time and labor than something like cremation is. And so, like, also for Recompose, it's really important that we're setting up like, you know, meaningful compensation and benefits for our staff, and not trying to join the rest of the funeral industry in underpaying funeral directors, etc., and operators and all that. So
We're a big fan.
Wonderful.
I mean, you know, like it's great. So, but it still remains a large cost, no question, for anyone looking at kind of like life costs over time. But so yeah, we love our community fund. It is built through like in lieu of flowers contributions and people buying Recompose swag on our little shop, and also those are the main ways, and we you know, it comes and goes, but we've been able to serve I think this year maybe 6 or 7 folks.
Awesome.
Bring it all the way down to $300 from the $7,000 price point.
That's wonderful.
Wow.
You know, it's not like right now. I think it's got nothing in it. So again, it's an up and down situation, which is tough for us.
That feels like our financial assistance too. Yeah, that's a tough one.
It's really important to us to be able to try and serve anyone who wants to come to Recompose.
That's wonderful. Yeah, it's funeral poverty is such a challenge, and you know, especially we saw here in Seattle that there were a lot of families that were impacted by losing multiple loved ones and, you know, having to fund multiple funerals, and so people are definitely keeping an eye on that stuff. And unfortunately, I think for a lot of families, they don't end up necessarily with the exact care that they want because at the end of the day, that price point is really, really powerful. But I understand that you have a program in place where people can do a little bit of financial planning.
Oh yeah, I mean, we also love our Precompose program. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, so Precompose is our pre-need plan. And we decided rather than go with an insurance product, full disclosure, I don't really understand how insurance always works, and I felt like
I don't know that anybody
we
does.
really
That's
so I'm like, we want to make everything exceedingly clear and straightforward that we do, like frankly from the beginning of it through the end. And so we went with a funeral trust for that reason, because I fully understand how a funeral trust works. You put your money into trust. It is regulated by the state of Washington. 90% sits there until the day you die, and 10% Recompose takes for operations up front. The lovely thing is you lock in today's price.
Oh, wonderful.
And the other lovely thing is we have the lowest monthly is $100 a month.
Wow.
We don't charge interest or anything like that. So
Wow.
I think most other providers do charge interest on top of that, but we're just letting you have that payment plan.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I even joke with Casey, you know, we work in death care, and if I were to die like this week, I wouldn't be able to afford a funeral. I need to wait till payday.
I'd help you out.
I should hope so. I think I've earned a free cremation, right?
Especially if you die in the line of work, Beverly. Thank you for your
Goodness
service.
me. that coffee spiked or something. And
You're just trying to generate business nefariously. Damn, she's good.
Got it.
No, so I mean, like having that option to slowly commit money over time is far more accessible. I mean, I'm a millennial, Casey's a millennial, you know, we're not like landed gentry or anything, so having the opportunity to make long-term investments in that care is a real game changer, because that's a huge hit financially to just suddenly have to pay for a funeral one day, and many families don't realize that and are really shocked to find that, you know, even the absolute most bare bones types of care are still really substantial expenses. So,
And I think buying a pre-need is completely a personal decision, and like it's not for everyone. But we started Recompose because people were, before it was legal, were like, can I prepay? And I was like, gosh, if people want to prepay, it seems really, really weird for me to say no.
yeah.
And then so we've developed this program, which we find it's like gives a ton of comfort and like just this feeling of I got it taken care of to a lot of people. And again, you don't have to buy Recompose. You can call us the minute someone dies. We've never heard of you before. We would love to welcome you into our space. But also, it's just nice. Some people love it, and also Recompose. How can you not like that name?
That's adorable. I'm sure that you felt very proud when you came up with that.
It was I'll give
Very
full credit to
clever.
my sister-in-law.
Yeah.
So my mom came up with Recompose.
Nice.
I know. And then my sister-in-law, probably a year or so later, was like, how about Pre-Compose? And I was like,
That's
okay. Thanks, family.
That's good. Have you noticed any trends to the folks that in particular are attracted to doing that financial plan over time?
Well, unlike, I presume,
Yeah.
cremation plans,
Mm-hmm.
we have, I think it is 25% or under 40
Okay.
in our Pre-Compose membership. So those folks are going to be like in our, ecosystem for hopefully decades.
Wow.
But no, I think otherwise, it's folks who are like, okay, I know I want this. Now I'm ready to take the next step and put some money down for it.
Well, that's so exciting. Yeah, we definitely notice, I think, for folks that want to prepay for cremation and burial, they tend to be a bit older and on fixed incomes, and they, want to sort of knock that out, not worry about it, or maybe Medicaid spend down, so that's a really common time to do it. So I don't know that I've encountered very many folks my own age who are interested in prepaying for that type of care.
Certainly not our millennial generation.
Yeah.
But the time will eventually come where it crosses the radar and they're trying to get their ducks in a row, and prepaying for funeral services, that really does give people a lot of relief. It saves them a lot of that stress or worry of what will happen. Turns out you can write it down. You can get that sorted out before you pass.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the questions I get the most often, is that people are often really eager to get that financial planning sort of squared away because they're trying to be more proactive. But I think there's some anxiety with the fact that your business is only 5 years old, and they're expecting, I'm taking my vitamins, I'm wearing my seatbelt, I'm gonna be around for a while.
Yeah.
How do I know Recompose is gonna be around that long? What do you say to families who they're interested in prepaying, but they're like, where's my money going? How's it protected? Like, what's the...
That's another reason to go with a funeral trust, in my opinion, is like, it's not sitting in Recompose's bank account. It is, again, a highly regulated funeral trust, different companies holding that money. And so I like it for those reasons too, because we are still new. We've only been around 5 years, operating anyway.
Yeah, that's true. I'm sure this is a lot longer in the pipeline, at least from the numerous podcasts I've listened to, where I'm just like, know her.
And I'll pitch it back to, as someone that's done this tour myself, you can tell this space was designed to be used for 50 years.
Oh, nice.
I walk around and I don't see plastic. I don't see cheap plywood. I see metals and stainless steels. I see things that are, even if they're new, I think meant to last a long time.
Yeah, and talk about environmental reasonings. Like, our vessels are going to last maybe 50 years.
Excellent.
And we're not trying to make something that's I just had no interest when I started this in doing something that would then either go to the landfill or just be a blip, right? It's really meant to be long lasting and sustainable. So
Yeah, that would sort of undermine the sort of messaging if your office was full of
Yeah.
plastic.
yeah, right.
Yeah, there's a lot of aspects in the funeral industry where I think you can see that dichotomy of we're trying to be friendly, but also there's cement and metals involved. But no, I can see that there's the values and sustainability throughout this entire process. And I do think people feel that when they walk into the space.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Which is another pitch for a tour. Come on in.
Come on in.
Say hi.
It's an awfully cool tour, and it's, you know, for us, this is the job that we do every day. We love talking about this stuff. We're only minimally freaked out. But it's so wild when I do community education and people are so excited to tell me, like, oh yeah, our retirement community, we have a field trip planned. We got a bus, we're all going to recompose. And they're just so excited to tell me about it. And it's so wild. Like, if you would have told me a couple of years ago that people would be like, oh my god, we went on the coolest tour of a funeral home, that would be a little bit strange, but it's really cool. People are really excited for that level of engagement, and I think it goes a long way to helping their anxiety about their mortality, to like see the space physically and see the people that are going to be caring for them. I think it makes it a lot warmer.
Yeah.
You know, we could do something where when I do the virtual meeting, maybe I'm doing also like a little virtual tour.
Ooh.
Without making
You
people
want to do like
dizzy.
a walk and
You
talk?
gotta be careful with the camera,
Ooh.
but something like
Let's do a
that.
classic West Wing walk and talk.
Ooh, selfie stick.
Hell
Yeah.
We can definitely do a location change. It's lovely in here.
Yeah.
We're in just one of the rooms, but I would love to see that.
Yeah,
I'm
that
sure
could be
members
fun.
again.
That could be fun.
Well, like Katrina said, Katrina will be joining People's Memorial Association again on April 26th at our 2025 annual meeting. It'll be live streamed only, so 1 to 3 o'clock on Zoom. Anyone, whether or not you're a People's Memorial Association member, please join us. Find out what People's Memorial has been up to this last year. It's a lot. And hear more from Katrina Spade. We have a lot of partners in this space, and we're very proud to be welcoming you back to our annual meeting again. I know you've been there before, so thank you again.
It'll be fun.